Welcome back. This session is all about the basics of CLT, which, as you all know by now, is the abbreviation of Communicative Language Teaching. And if you have looked at your reading pieces already, then you will know that they are listed as the 10 core principles. Also, in the reading pieces, you will see that one of the aims of this course is for you to adapt these methods to your own unique classroom circumstances and style of teaching. Remember that every school is different and circumstances in each school change continually, so flexibility should be one of the key terms used to describe us teachers. Right, let's take a look at this list. The first principle is that learning a second language is easier if it is done through interaction involving meaningful communication, with the stress on meaningful in this case. Your task in the classroom is to guide your scholars through the learning process so that they genuinely benefit from every lesson. Next, we are expected to use tasks in such a way that the learners find their own meaning, which is, of course, the deductive principle that we studied in Unit 2. Ideally, the learners should be guided into a position in which they notice for themselves how a language is used. And here is for me one of the key aspects of a good lesson. It must not be boring. The reading pieces put it in slightly different language by stating that lesson content should be relevant, purposeful, interesting, and engaging, which is a valid description of a good lesson. But I prefer my own wording in this case. No boring stuff, please. Then we have the word holistic. But don't worry, all that this means in simple English is that the lessons should focus on multiple language skills, not just one. The language skills in question being listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This tends to happen quite naturally by itself in any classroom situation, by the way, so it's easy to apply. Now, the fifth principle in the list overlaps with the second one because, again, the inductive approach to language learning is brought up, in which the learners are exposed to selected examples so that they can work out language rules for themselves. Somewhat confusingly, the reading pieces then go on to say that it's perfectly all right to use the old-fashioned deductive approach, which all of us use to a certain extent, if we're quite honest, even though the CLT purists regard it as an absolute no-no. Okay, next we have the obvious but very logical statement that language learning is gradual and creative, which involves trial and error. And this in turn means that we are going to encounter mistakes, lots of mistakes. And it's how we handle these mistakes that determines our effectiveness as English teachers. Right, in the seventh principle in the list, we encounter the fact that all children are different and that they learn at different speeds and in different ways. But you don't need a professor to tell you that, right? Languages in particular have a way of demonstrating this in the classroom. The child who achieves prestigious results in all his orals, for example, will often produce only mediocre essays and vice versa. Good. Moving on. Now, this next one talks about using effective learning and communication strategies, which is an excellent example of verbosity, in my opinion. So let's simplify this by looking at the word strategy. There you can see it on the screen, a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. What this means for you as a teacher in the classroom is that you must be an expert in your subjects and must know how to apply good teaching methods in the classroom. Oh yes, don't forget to plan everything well in advance. Now, the ninth principle in this list overlaps yet again with numbers 2 and 5, since it talks about the teacher being a facilitator who creates opportunities for the learners to use and practice the language. Are you picking up the overtones of the inductive approach here again? You are indeed. Finally, the list ends by describing the classroom as a community in which the scholars learn by collaboration and sharing. And if that sounds as if it's a bit idealistic, well, I suppose it is, but to a very large extent, it's also perfectly true. And as is the case in any community, a classroom is made up of individual, different and flawed people, so don't expect perfection. There you are. Those are the core principles of communicative language teaching, and I encourage you to learn them so that you can apply them in your classroom whenever it's appropriate, which it isn't always. Remember that we as teachers are as different as the children in our classes, and what works for you may be completely useless for someone else. So develop your own unique style to make yourself into the most effective possible teacher. See you shortly.